Hi everyone, I'm Daniel Zoe Jimenez and I lead Digital Transformation Research at IDC Asia Pacific. Today I'm going to talk about digital agility. To do so, I'm going to share with you the results of this piece of research that was sponsored by Workday. Now we survey over 800 organizations across 9 countries in the region to better understand the state of digital agility as well as the challenges organizations have been facing throughout the pandemic. Now, if you remember, 8 years ago, when we started talking about digital transformation, it was all about embracing change so that we could compete with these digital disruptors, essentially nimble and agile organizations that were penetrating our industries. Unfortunately, today we see disruption coming from natural disasters and even health outbreaks. Now, if you look at this chart, which represents the results of our study, what we see is that COVID-19 has severely impacted our businesses, starting with work and the workplace, which is something that was particularly called out by organizations in Malaysia, but also sales performance, something that also organizations in Indonesia and Thailand mentioned as their #1 area that was most impacted. At the same time, and something that is related, customer engagement initiatives were also particularly impacted in Singapore. This is not a surprise, considering that COVID-19 has forced our organizations to move from physical to digital first type of engagements as a result of all the lockdowns and social distancing measures. Now, what is clear is that COVID-19, the pandemic, has exacerbated some of the challenges that many of our organizations have been facing so far. If you look at the chart, you will see that 75% of organizations have actually struggled to realign their organizational structures, something that is fundamental when we are suffering a crisis. But also at the same time, 79% of organizations struggle in their ability to quickly update their financial plans. So as you can see on the chart, 20% of these organizations that are highlighted in blue, these organizations which we call digitally agile, not only have been less impacted by this crisis, but also have taken this crisis as an opportunity to become more agile, transform their organizations, and even improve their competitive advantage. So something that has become very apparent to everyone is that these organizations that had already started their digital transformation journeys prior to the pandemic have been more agile and have been able to minimize this disruption. As a result of this, what is clear to everyone is that digital transformation is no longer an option. It's actually a necessity. And as a result, you can see that most organizations are prioritizing digital transformation and particularly focusing on transforming processes, as you can see on the left of the chart, particularly finance, planning, and accounting, something that has become the #1 priority for organizations in Malaysia and Singapore. Now, when you look at organizations in Indonesia, their priority for these efforts has been around improving employee productivity and efficiency. This is something that these organizations are doing by leveraging digital technologies like RPA, AI, ML, but also industrial robots. So when you look at Thailand organizations, what they've been doing is prioritizing the creation of new revenue streams. These organizations have been focusing on diversifying their products and services, but also capitalizing on their data sets to create new revenue streams. Now, all these organizations are focused on becoming more digitally agile. But the question is, what is digital agility? Now in IDC, looking at these organizations, these 20% of organizations that we found out that they were actually, that they were capitalizing on this crisis to transform, to become more agile, we actually look at the traits of these organizations and we created this framework of assessment. Now, if you look at the definition at the bottom, at IDC, we talk about the ability for an organization to dynamically sense, understand, and act in response to changing market conditions quickly. So in order to better understand what these organizations are doing well, we created this framework of assessment that you have on the screen. So we look at 4 critical dimensions or areas of masteries. So starting with organizational culture. So we look at whether or not the organization has a digital mindset, a culture of transformation. But also we look at whether or not the organization has a business model that can be future-proof. At the same time, we look at the type of organizational structures, but also whether or not your company has a digital transformation strategy. Now, when you look at people and capabilities, we look at the availability for digital skills in your organization. Not only whether or not those skills are available in a particular area of the business, but if those skills are available enterprise-wide. At the same time, we look at whether or not your organization is delivering on that employee experience that is necessary to compete in the digital economy. Now, if you look at processes and governance, this is a particularly important area. We look at the levels of process automation that there is in your organization, as well as the alignment and integration of those processes, particularly looking at finance and also HR. At the same time, we look at whether or not there has been establishment of a budget for digital transformation that is dedicated for all those initiatives across the entire organization. Lastly, we look at performance metrics, particularly trying to understand whether or not your organization has created a digital performance scorecard, something that I will tell you as we move forward in this presentation. Lastly, we look at technologies. Does your organization has the right technologies in order to compete and become resilient for the future? Do you have a single integrated technology roadmap? And also whether or not you have the right integration between those critical areas that I talked about earlier. For example, looking at HR, but also your finance, your capital. Now, what are the results of this piece of research? So, if you look at the chart, you will see that most organizations in our region, particularly looking at Asia Pacific, Japan, are actually on the second stage of maturity. I'm referring to 42% of organizations. Now, 38% of organizations, on the other hand, are only starting this journey of digital agility, and only 2% are truly digitally agile. Now, when you look at ASEAN, you will see that organizations in ASEAN are lagging behind when you compare them to the average organization in the Asia Pacific region overall. Now, what does it mean to be on the first stage of maturity? It means that your strategies, your business and IT strategies are disconnected and poorly aligned to your enterprise-wide strategy. But also looking at technologies, it means that the way that you are using digital technologies, if you are on the slow stage, or stage 1, it means that the way that you are using technologies is only to counter competitive threats. And of course, I'm referring to digital technologies. Now, when you move to stage 2 of maturity, essentially that tactical stage, it means that at that stage, your organization is already formalizing a digital transformation plan, an integrated enterprise-wide holistic strategy. You are starting to formalize that. When it comes to the use of your digital technologies, at that point, of course, you are already using digital technologies more progressively across the entire organization, but your efforts are still siloed. They are still tactical. So what that means is that you might be, someone in the line of business might be using or starting to experiment with some of those digital technologies, while someone else is actually experimenting with others. But there is no repeatability in your efforts. That's what we need to achieve. Now, something fundamental that we've learned throughout this research is that once organizations reach this second stage of maturity, they take long to move past that stage and move to stage 3, or integrated. Now, in order to better understand what were the challenges that were stopping organizations from moving past, from moving forward, we dig deeper in this research. Let me show you what we found. So, if you look at the different dimensions of assessment that I talked about earlier, you will see that in the 2 areas where most organizations struggle, both for Asia Pacific overall, but also for ASEAN, is actually in the areas of process and governance and technologies. Now, what we did as a result of that is to talk a little bit more with these organizations to try to identify which areas within processes and technologies were the key roadblocks. Okay, so now let's look at processes. If you look at the chart, particularly the bubble on the left, you'll see that 85% of organizations across the region struggle to change their business processes in response to COVID-19. This is particularly important because what we need to ensure is that our processes are agile. Those processes can be rigid, otherwise it doesn't allow us to fine-tune the processes as we move forward. So this has been particularly important and challenging for these organizations as they were trying to become resilient. But also, if you see the second bubble, 79% of organizations were struggling to quickly update those financial plans, particularly looking at budgets and, of course, forecasting during the pandemic. Now, 80% of organizations also struggle with their finance and HR process integration. And this is fundamental because having that integration between these two fundamental processes allows the organization to have a full visibility into two critical areas of the business. I'm referring to, of course, resources and capital. Now, let's look at technologies. If you look at this chart, actually, the first bubble, you'll see that 79% of organizations' core systems were not digitally enough. What this means is that while they were working on process automation, particularly as it relates to their core systems, those processes weren't digital enough. These, of course, created some roadblocks for these organizations to create new revenue streams, but also to become more agile as we were moving forward during the pandemic. Now, at the same time, 74% of organizations are still operating over disconnected HR and finance platforms. So if you recall from the previous chart, I was telling you about that lack of process integration between those two fundamental areas, HR and also finance. So in this chart, what I'm actually talking about is the lack of system integration, something that many organizations are obviously trying to tackle. Now, let me actually conclude with some recommendations here. So as you try to move forward and build that agility, that digital agility that is going to be fundamental to future-proof your businesses, our recommendations are as follows. Let's start with the organization and culture. First, you should create a centralized digital transformation office. You might call this a center of excellence for digital transformation. So essentially, what this is going to help you with is to create that governance, that essential governance that will allow you to create repeatability in your digital transformation projects. At the same time, consider creating a senior executive digital transformation role. You might bring someone from external to your organization or appoint someone internally that might be a chief digital officer or someone in the line of business or even in IT that can actually bring everyone together in your organization. Remember that digital transformation is a team sport. So you should ensure that everyone, both in the line of business but also in IT, is actually collaborating in their digital transformation efforts. Now, lastly, as part of the organizational and cultural dimension, you should also create a centralized digital transformation budget that will allow you to consolidate all those digital transformation initiatives and avoid repeatability. Now, if we look at people and capabilities, start by auditing your current digital talent in your organization. By doing so, also you need to find or identify those talents that are going to help you, by creating some change agents across the organization. All right, second, work with that centralized digital transformation office that you have established to identify major talent gaps. So what you have to think about is to perform a skill gaps assessment so that you understand what are the gaps in talent in reference to the talent that you might need today, but also the talent that you might need 3 years down the road. So in order to do so, start by focusing on cultivating the talent that you currently have. Of course, by upgrading those skills from your current workforce, but also focusing on attracting the relevant talent that you might need in the future. Also, try to widen up your ecosystem engagements so that you can potentially get some of that talent from external third parties. Maybe you might work with the academia, but also create some hackathons to acquire relevant talent for the future. Now, when you look at processes, also start by auditing your core processes and identify core processes gaps. That will help you fine-tune those processes that you can potentially digitalize, especially in cross-functional areas and workflows. At the same time, look for opportunities to redesign your current business processes for increased agility. Lastly, something that is fundamental there for that particular area is that I would recommend you to create a new digital performance scorecard. Most of us today, when we look at the performance scorecards that we create in our organizations, we only incorporate standard metrics for success. So I'm referring to key financial metrics like top line, bottom line, and so on. Those metrics are fundamental, but we also need to incorporate new digital metrics for success. So I'm referring to things like data capitalization rates, but other things like innovation rates, or even maybe NPS scores. Those are leading indicators. So what you should do and consider is to combine those traditional metrics, financial metrics, but also these new digital metrics for success. Lastly, and to conclude, technologies. Now, start by focusing on aggressively modernizing your current IT infrastructure. This is going to be fundamental because in order to achieve that scale in the front end, you will need to ensure that that back end can actually support for all that scale on your customer engagement interactions. So it's going to be very, very important to ensure that that infrastructure allows you for that scale on your customer engagement initiatives, but also with your employees. Now, the second area that is fundamental here is designing an integrated technology architecture that spans across business, digital, and IT domains. And lastly, establish a digital roadmap, a combined and integrated technology roadmap that will allow you to bring everyone together. Because today what we normally see is that most organizations will have several unintegrated and siloed technology roadmaps. That, of course, doesn't allow to bring everyone together in the same journey of transformation. So remember, focus on creating a single technology roadmap and on the creation of an integrated technology architecture that spans across digital, business, and IT domains. So with that, I hope that this presentation was useful to you, and good luck on your digital agility journey. Thank you. Hi everyone, and welcome to this panel. Greetings from Singapore. I'm Daniel Zoe Jimenez, as I mentioned earlier during my presentation, and today we are going to be talking about digital agility. To do so, we are here with Chi Yuen from Surbana Jurong, as well as with Raghu Prasad from Workday. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Hope that you are doing fine. All good? Excellent. So during my presentation, you probably saw that I was talking about the importance of being digitally agile, but also the challenges that organizations were facing in their journeys, particularly, they've been affected with particularly around work and the workplace, but also around sales performance and customer engagement. So I want to start with you, Chi Yuen. So what I would like to ask you is, first to obviously introduce yourself, the role that you have in your organization, but also tell me, in the context of your organization, how much has your organization and your team actually been impacted throughout this crisis? And just give us a sense as to which areas were the most affected.
Thank you very much, Daniel. First, let me introduce myself and my organization. I'm the group CIO for Surbana Jurong. Surbana Jurong is one of the largest Asia-based architecture and engineering consultancy company. It operates in Africa, in Asia, Americas, Australia, and UK. 2020 is a challenging year for Sabana Jurong. We are very much affected by the pandemic situation, where the lockdowns and the economic fallout are affecting our clients, especially in the aviation, urban, and construction sector. So when our clients face a slowdown, we as part of the value chain will also suffer a downturn. But fortunately, our managed services are in good shape and offer a good buffer against the decline of our consultancy business. Now, in the COVID-19 situation, we face pretty much challenges in terms of deploying the mobile devices to the homes of the employee, especially those devices that require compute-intensive computing for engineering application. We are very much in the cloud and mobility, and therefore most of the applications that has been on daily use, especially operating in the global theater, the application processing are still very much ongoing. Thank you.
Yeah, that's particularly relevant, right? When you think about all those employees that are working remotely now, that they need to be hybrid employees, and particularly those that are designing from home now remotely, they definitely need that sort of computing power, right? So it must have been a tough job, actually. Okay, so welcome, Raghu. Thank you for joining us in this panel today.
Thank you.
Now, you probably saw me earlier when I was presenting and talking about the fact that 75% of organizations in our region have been impacted, and obviously that has led to them not being able to reorganize or realign their organizational structures. What I would like to know is, obviously, first start by introducing yourself, tell us about what you do in Workday, but more importantly, how is Workday helping tackle that challenge?
Hi, Daniel. Hi, Chiyun. Thanks for having me out here. My name is Raghu, and I lead the solution consulting team in Workday in the Asia-Pacific region. We are a team of subject matter experts cutting across the various functions that Workday supports in the market: HR, financials, planning, analytics. And we also have a team of architects that focus on the technology. Workday, as you know, is a company that's been operating in the Asia-Pacific region for around 7 years now, globally for around 15 years. Daniel, as you mentioned, the pandemic has had a significant impact on all the three dimensions: the work, the workplace, and the workforce itself. And this is one of the reasons that we commissioned the Digital Agility Index research jointly with IDC. Our intent was to try and understand how COVID-19 is impacting our customers' businesses, and what could we as Workday do to help our customers be more resilient. Like Workday, many of our customers have had to reorganize their organization structures during this period. The reorganization could be due to a variety of reasons. It could be trying to set up redundant teams or cross-functional task forces, which are very often needed. Or it could just be leadership changes that are needed at this point in time. And it's very important that the IT systems that the organizations rely on enable them to do this fairly quickly. With Workday, it's a matter of a drag and drop and a few clicks to achieve such organizational hierarchy changes. Workday also supports a variety of different capabilities, such as multiple organization structures. For example, an organization structure related to the supervisory hierarchy, something related to the cost centers, and something else that might be related to projects, which are very important in this point in time because projects are set up for specific tasks. We support contingent as well as full-time labor. And these capabilities are all brought in to try and provide the kind of agility that customers need. We believe that successful organizations need agility, particularly when it comes to their digital initiatives. And that's where Workday has been focused on. We've tried to provide the capabilities here. We can affect organizational changes in a matter of minutes rather than days or months. And we believe this has brought some advantages to the application management teams in our customer sites, as well as to the office of the CHRO, making things much easier to affect in these troubled times.
Well, that's very interesting, but can you give me some examples of how you are helping customers achieve that goal?
Yeah, sure. Most of you would have heard about if you're a follower of tennis, you probably follow one of the Grand Slams in the region, which is the Australian Open. The Australian Open is conducted by an organization known as Tennis Australia. And Tennis Australia is one of our customers. They in fact implemented Workday right in the middle of the pandemic. They went live on Workday in May 2020. And the epicenter of the pandemic has been, in recent times in Australia, has been Melbourne. And that's where Tennis Australia is also centered. They had to very quickly pivot to a remote work style, introduce some work style innovation where managers could keep track of their employees, keep them engaged, keep them productive, while at the same time execute on the projects that they have, the biggest one being the Australian Open in 2021, January. And they were able to do all of this with Workday. In fact, the statement by Scott Glover, who's the head of people and culture at Tennis Australia, is very telling. His words were to the effect that the pandemic caused us a huge change in our business, and I couldn't have imagined how we would have survived without Workday. The insights that Workday provided on the workforce were extremely useful for our operations. But Tennis Australia is not the only one. Philips is a global company. They use our HR systems globally across the world, and they managed to get significant organizational agility through this. In fact, they reduced their HR cost of operations by close to around 15%, and their total IT cost of operations around the HR systems by 30% by leveraging Workday.
Okay, back to you, Chi Yuen. Earlier you talked about those challenges that your organization overall has faced during the pandemic. Now what I'm really interested to hear from you is, now when you think about your team and your group, which is IT, right? Where have you seen the biggest impact from a systems perspective, and how you've been able to help on that regard?
Well, SJ is a global company, so we operate globally. So in fact, most of our staff are always collaborating with the colleagues all over the world using video conferencing tools and collaboration tools. So the use of these tools during this pandemic period is no stranger to our staff. So in fact, they are very, very conversant with the use of this tool. Right? The impact to the workplace during this COVID period is really about the physical processes that needs to be done during this period. For example, documents that need physical authentication. HR, in the area of HR, the hiring of new employees, their interviewing process, the onboarding process, right, needs to be done through the online, right, remotely, rather than the usual physical process that we have. Yeah? Essential activities like the support, repair, and the replacement of computer equipment needs to be arranged for this. But fortunately, we do have a pandemic BCP plan in place. So even before the start of the lockdown, those have been activated. And in fact, the plan of the split of the employee into home and office team it's already very much activated and executed well before the lockdown. So when the lockdown happened, the people are very much in tune with the procedures. Yeah. The other thing I want to point out is that on the technology area, because we have this cloud-first strategy, with most of our application on cloud or mobile accessible by mobile devices. Right? So the impact on the accessibility of the information, right, are very much contained. Yeah. So I would say that for organizations that will needs to overcome this pandemic situation, we really need to think about mobility and agility as a way for accessibility of the application, right, anywhere, independent of the location.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, something that the pandemic is actually showing us all is that it doesn't really matter where you are, right? You can work from anywhere, anytime. And that's why we are seeing the shift in management orientation, really, with managers and leaders shifting from processes to outcomes in the way that they lead their teams today. A follow-up question that I have for you, Chi Yuen, is I was thinking as you were talking about the importance of having kind of like a holistic view into two fundamental areas in the organization. That is your capital and your resources, right? In the context of the pandemic, right? Having visibility into those key areas, in my opinion, at least, or in IDC's view, is very, very important. What was your view on that?
No, obviously, that the IT head needs to have a clear visibility on the resources, right, and capital, right, especially on the IT assets, on the supply, the demand, and the utilization in response to the critical requirement of the business, right, and also in different situational scenarios, right, whether it is during peacetime or whether it is during a continuity period like the pandemic period. Sometimes at this point in time it is pandemic. In another period of time it could be something else that crops up. So the scenario planning needs to be really done on the assets, right? And the business critical requirement on the use of these assets. It will then give the IT head the chance to go and critically map out the resources availability, right, and the requirement for the deployment of these resources, so that when it's activated, it can be better prepared and ready for the pandemic. Yeah. In our situation, because we adopt cloud technology and mobile technology, we are more ready, right, for this pandemic situation. Yeah. And I'm glad that SJ has actually gone through this pandemic situation without much bottlenecks. Thank you.
That's very interesting. And Brago, this is for you. As Chi Yuen was mentioning earlier, and I think that you alluded to this, right? Is this part of that integration between those two areas, right? That process integration between HR and finance that obviously comes from a system perspective, right? So what I was wondering is, in your view, Brago, and also from the standpoint of Workday, how is Workday actually helping organizations with that cross-functional integration, particularly as it comes to the fundamental areas of HR and capital, which is finance, obviously, but also with a component of analytics, right, to provide that sort of better view and understanding and planning moving forward.
Right. We refer to this as the power of one, Daniel, and this is one of the fundamental principles on which Workday has been designed. Right. All our applications, whether it is the HCM, the human capital management, or the financials, or planning, or analytics, are built on one platform, which basically means that they leverage one source of data. They have a single security model. They provide a common experience, one experience. All our customers run on one version of the software, and all our customers and partners and us together, we come together as one community to progress the software. Now, the power of one gives us a whole lot of advantages when it comes to bringing HR and financials together. It's basically HR and financials on the same platform, on one platform. But when you dig a little deeper, what does that mean? Let's take an example of an entity that is common across HR and financials, resources, as you said. And if you boil down resources, it basically works out to workers and employees, workers or employees. So for us in Workday, in the power of one design, the entity of a worker is common across HR and financials. There are a whole lot of other entities which are similar, like organizations, invoices, expense types, which are common entities across the two systems. Now, by putting them onto one platform and having a common definition of this across the different functions, we eliminate the integration, the data integration, the service integration that's needed between HR systems and financial systems, or even between different parts of the financial system, like between expenses and procurement. For example, we eliminate all of that. And then when you add in something like analytics, we provide real-time insight and analytics on top of all of this information that's there in our system. It gives you a further element of an edge. You don't need to extract all the data that's there in the HR and financial systems, put it out into an external data warehouse before you run your analytics programs on that and get some insight. You get it all on the in-memory data that's there within the Workday platform. So this is one technology platform that we often talk about, and it's the power of one. And many of our customers have benefited from this over the years. One customer that comes to mind is one of the big players in the media industry, media and entertainment industry. Most of us would have heard about Netflix. Netflix leveraged both our HR and financial systems together. And what they did when they started the project 2 years ago was that they replaced 11 different applications with the one Workday platform. Applications that went across HR, financials, procurement, expenses, time tracking, as well as payroll, and a few other applications. They replaced all of that with the Workday platform. In their own words, this gave them increased business agility, of course, but also increased process automation and increased usability and user experience across their users. We have other customers similar to Netflix in the region who have leveraged us for both HR and financials together here in Singapore too, as well as in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Australia, and New Zealand. Customers who leverages across HR and financials and get the benefit.
You just made a really important point there with usability, right? Because even if you have the best system in place, unless people use it, actually, it won't be relevant, right, Raghu? Now, Chi-Yuen, I understand that you guys have selected Workday at Savannah Jurong, right?
Yes.
How are you planning to use it, and what are the benefits that you're expecting to achieve through the use of Workday?
Good question. There are two critical factors that we're looking at. SJ is a capability company. Our clients look towards us for the talents and the creativity to make the difference and the uniqueness in our project designs, which also means that we need to have a good visibility into our competency of our people. So the ability of having real-time reporting and analytics on our competency and capabilities of our staff will enable our management to make better decisions in terms of availability and deployment right, for the projects. So that's one critical part for the management view. The second part is really for the staff. We are looking for a one integrated solution that can be deployed on desktop and mobile devices.
Right.
As most of our staff are knowledge and mobile professionals. So the ability of the Workday and deployed on the SaaS model on the cloud is a natural solution for us in this respect. So there you have it. So therefore, I think the winning formula is really about from the management perspective and from the staff perspective, that Workday provide us a solution that allow us to do both objectives.
That's interesting.
Thank you.
Now, before you leave, actually, I just want you to, as you look at the audience and think about your peers, do you have any departing thought, any recommendation to your peers that are watching us today?
I think one of the advice for all of us in the IT industry and organization is to be resilient. Right? And to be resilient actually got two aspects. Number one, data agility and portability is important because that's where all your management decisions are based upon. Right? And with it, therefore, mobility, right? With cloud technology and many other technologies that allow you to exhibit mobility, that's very key for you to be resilient, to be prepared and ready for situation and other scenarios. So that's one. But it also means that, number two, also means that we need to encapsulate security within this context, because it comes with mobility and data portability and agility. There will always be the question about security. How do we therefore make sure that our data and our accessibility is secure? So therefore there's a need for a more alert and surveillance on the security system. Okay.
Those are very interesting points. Thank you very much for that. Now, Raghu, I would like you to close this panel actually with some departing thoughts, and if there is anything that you would recommend to your customers and prospects today, those that are watching us, what will it be, particularly as they think about digital agility, working potentially with Workday, and achieving those goals of future-proofing their businesses?
Right. So I think, as you've said, Daniel, digital initiatives have accelerated during the pandemic period, and it's fairly important for organizations to look at digitalization not just in their front-end systems or the CRM platforms, but also digitalization of the core. The example that I often give is, would you like to drive a souped-up car which has got great dashboards, which has got nice wheels, good paintwork and everything, but the engine is 25 years old? Resiliency is all about that engine in that car. So we believe at Workday that it's probably important to start looking at digitalizing the core, and Silvana Jurong has done some amazing work and has led the way here in Singapore in many ways there. It's important to look at the core and not just the surface of things. And when you start looking at the core, one of the important things, one of the takeaway messages that I would have for the technologists and our customers would be that the architecture matters. The architecture of the system that you're investing in matters. Can that particular architecture support things like easy organizational structural changes? Can it support a skills-driven economy, which is what the whole world is getting towards now? Does it support embedded analytics in real time? Does it support embedded machine learning? Machine learning has got more data to leverage in the system of records than in the system of engagement. Does it support a variety of other things like flexible financial reporting and continuous business planning? Business planning has moved on to being weekly these days, or even daily rather than annual. So does the architecture support all of this in order to provide that agility that's needed for the success of these companies? So architecture does matter, and that's where I think there is going to be a little bit of focus as digitalization of the core happens.
All right, okay, that's great. Thank you very much both for participating in the panel today. So I hope that was useful as well to our audience, and thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good morning, once again. So we've had a very interesting panel discussion where we spoke around a variety of different topics around digital agility. What I'm going to speak about now is how do you establish an agile digital core? The pandemic has obviously changed many aspects of our lives, personal lives as well as professional lives over the last few months. And in the middle of it all has been the IT organization, whether it's trying to keep us connected or continue the business or provide the right level of insights. IT is at the center of all this change. It has been a Herculean effort to get the workforce to work remotely and connect them back into various functions. Along with this remote working methodology, has been the variety of different security considerations that go along with it and data privacy needs that are inherent to a hybrid mode of working and a remote mode of working. IT has had to also engage employees or provide the systems through which this engagement gets done, integrate across different kinds of systems, and provide the insights necessary to the CEOs, the CFOs, as well as various functional leads for them to continue their business. Most importantly, IT has had to provide the level of organizational agility that has been needed for organizations to respond and now recover from the pandemic. Now, IT's challenges are not limited to just what the pandemic has brought about. In the middle of all of this, one of the areas that IT has had to look at is their core enterprise systems. And when it comes to the core enterprise systems, there are many questions to consider for the office of the CIO. There are issues such as, does the enterprise business application that they might want to invest in or that they might want to change to, does that adapt to changing user demands? If something new is to be invested in, will that require a forklift migration or an upgrade at a certain point in time, which could be fairly expensive? Will a new platform that's at the heart of the business, the enterprise core application like a HR or a financial system, would that take care or take advantage of emerging technologies? Will it be secure? Will it be compliant to the particular location and the countries in which the organization operates? And most importantly, the question that often doesn't get asked, will it help the office of the CIO move the needle in terms of the organization's digital strategy? So many questions to ponder, and this is where Workday comes in. Workday has been enabling digital agility at organizations across the world. But let's take a step back to what Workday fundamentally believes in. The fundamental design principles on which we developed our platform can be encapsulated in 3 statements. Power of one, which we spoke about a little bit during the panel discussion 2. Inspired by the consumer internet. All our applications are inspired by the consumer internet and built for the future. We always believe that in critical decisions like new enterprise systems, what's important is the architecture of the new platform that's being put in. So architecture does matter, and it underlies some of our fundamental design thinking in our products. So let me touch upon each of these aspects a little more in detail. I'll start with the power of one. I mentioned during the panel discussion that the power of one basically means all our applications coming together on a common platform, leveraging one source of data, a common security model, one experience, and one community. But what are these applications? These are the enterprise back office systems that need to be digitalized, such as the human capital management, the financial management, planning, business planning, spend management, as well as the analytics that support these different applications. We've seen during the pandemic that activities such as planning have had a 30-fold increase in the usage as organizations move from annual or quarterly planning to weekly and daily planning, a 30-fold increase. That's significant. Now, let's assume that you need this planning information to also impact your transactional systems. Imagine if you could bring the planning together with the transactional systems, the HR, the core HR, and the financial systems to affect the transactions there. But at the same time, you can also get real-time insights through dashboards and analytics. That is exactly what Workday enables through the power of one. We call this the virtuous cycle of plan, execute, and analyze. But that doesn't stand alone. It's based on a foundational set of technologies where we enable mobility. We built on an object data model that runs in memory, a common security construct across all the applications, inbuilt business process frameworks so that investments do not need to be done in external systems and integrated into it, an integration cloud that is inbuilt into our cloud itself to help us to integrate both data and service to external platforms, and the concept of embedded reporting and analytics at every step of the way. But we didn't stop there. We'll built this foundation to take advantage of emerging technologies. What you hear about the most in the market today is machine learning, AI, blockchain, natural workspaces. Now, these are all things that Workday does today. Let's take machine learning as an example. It makes a lot more sense for machine learning to work off huge volumes of data, and that's what we store in our transactional systems in the HR as well as in the financial systems. We have integrated to natural workspaces such as Teams and Slack, which is where most of the enterprise users work today. We've incorporated graph technologies into our analytics so that we can build relationships diagrammatically across various elements of our systems. We have conversational digital assistants that are powered by machine learning that provide recommendations to the users at the right moment and at the right time. Now, this is the power of one, but it doesn't stop there. What we've done over a period of time is designed our entire system to be cloud native right from day one. And what this means is that the continuous delivery of innovation that you often see in internet-based systems today has been something that Workday has had for a long time. We provide weekly updates to our platforms, which include both functionality as well as fixes, and 2 major releases every year. And customers do not really need to worry about how upgrades are done. These are taken care of in the backend for the customers through our cloud operations teams. Currently, we are on what we call as release 2020 R2, and we had a release 2020 R1 6 months ago, and 6 months later, we'll have 21 R1 too. And every customer gets an internal system, a preview platform, and a production system, all of which are upgraded right away when the new release hits them. 3,200 customers all on one version of the platform, and this gives a significant advantage to both the customers as well as to us in terms of managing the systems. Let's look at machine learning. I touched upon machine learning a few minutes ago, but what does this mean from the point of view of a company that uses it? A variety of different approaches apply to machine learning. Many companies have looked at machine learning from the point of view of applying that to a data lake or an external data store. The Workday approach is a little different. We've embedded machine learning where the data is, which is in our core systems itself, the HR and the financial systems. So we use machine learning and train the algorithms on the huge amounts of data that we have across all our tenants, and customers have an option to get these use cases readily built that have been readily built in the system. They have the option to get this. In the area of HR, for example, we look at areas such as retention risk. We build a pool of skills that we call as an ontology of skills, or a skills graph, that helps us to recommend particular skills for a job, or recommend areas of augmentation that individuals need to have in order to apply for a job. We also look at recommendation or candidate matching of candidates to a particular role, and all of this is powered by machine learning. In the area of finance, for example, it's anomaly detection during journalizing, which can help improve the speed and the pace at which reconciliations are done in the financial systems. Supply invoice matching, customer payment matching. These are capabilities that we brought machine learning into in our financial systems. In the area of experience, employee experience, we enable the natural workspaces like Slack and Microsoft Teams, but the recommendations that go out, the actions that go out into these systems are powered by machine learning. Workday Assistant, journeys that we can enable in our systems for our customers, once again, are powered by machine learning. The kind of recommendations that are provided are again driven by machine learning. So we embed machine learning into the systems so that you don't need to worry about, okay, how do I get the data out? How do I apply and train the algorithms? And how do I feed that back into the core systems? You don't need to worry about any of those. And this is a huge help for the office of the CIO. Ultimately, our objective is to make it easier, life easier for the office of the CIO by providing an agile architecture, a secure system, and something that's very open and integrated so that you can have both data and service integrations to external platforms. A foundation that's built for change, and this is exactly what one of our customers said. What we love about Workday is that it's not a roadblock to change, but an enabler to help us manage change effectively. Now, as we've all seen, change is all about agility, and agility is what drives success in companies. And working together with IDC, what we did was come up with a digital agility measure for organizations. And this is something that's available once again to the office of the CIO or any business function there. How do you measure your own agility? And this survey or this tool helps you to measure your digital agility index. There are some examples out here, but there's much more that you can do with the Workday representatives. We'll come across and have a discussion with you about how to measure your own digital agility. So with that, I'd like to say, yep, we are here to make life easier for the office of the CIO and architecture matters. Thank you very much.